The remote and rugged natural beauty of Te Urewera. At its heart, Maungapōhatu, a sacred site for the people of Tūhoe.
He ririki a Maungapōhatu. It's different, it's a special place. When we have manuhiri coming here from all over the world, they feel the wairua of this place.
But that well-being was forever tainted by the injustice suffered by an iwi for more than a century. Following the brutal treatment of its visionary leader, Rua Kēnana, and his devoted followers.
Only 2 people died, but it was like a whole community died.
The government has officially apologised for the traumas of the past.
The descendants of Rua Kēnana have suffered ongoing hurt, shame, stigma.
And now his descendants are taking the final steps, seeking justice for their tipuna.
Now's the time for our voice to be heard.
And what about those who didn't get to live to see this day?
We walk alongside our ancestors. They are here with us. That's what makes us strong. Ngā mihi atu kia rātou.
Rua Kēnana was born in 1869 and by the age of 38 had created a self-sufficient kāinga at the foot of Maungapōhatu. Rua was a man well ahead of his time and had built this peaceful community on 3 core values: kotahitanga, environmental wellness and whakapono. Married to 12 wives, Rua was the leader of this once thriving village, home to around 1,000 people. But today, only a handful of whānau come to visit this isolated settlement. This is a place steeped in history and religion, but the people's faith here was shattered after a bloody police invasion more than 100 years ago. This is a journey into Tūhoe's past, redefining its history and restoring the mana of the prophet Rua Kēnana, my great-great-grandfather. Our story begins on the other side of the valley from Maungapōhatu in Matahi, at my whānau marae Tuapou. I'm here to meet my uncle, Wayne Boynton. Kia ora, uncle. Good to see you.
Tēnā koe.
This is where Rua Kēnana spent his final days and where he's laid to rest.
He wanted to be embedded in stone. Yes, so that was his wishes, and so his followers, they put him in the tomb there. E te karaua moe mai rā tōku tīpuna, moe mai rā. E rota te moe noa tō tātou matu nui te rani. Haere atu rā kia rātou, kai koni rā mātou.
Mere Tukua Whakātātā was the eldest child of Rua Kēnana and his first wife, Pine Pine. Now 70 years old, Uncle Wayne recalls the stories his kuia would share about life in Maungapōhatu.
Had a pretty enjoyable life up there. They had what all they needed. It was harsh times, like for food and that, and they had crops and that, and they harvested the crops and made sure they had it ready for the winter. Nanny would talk about her father in a way that that he had the vision to bring his people out of the poverty and hard life they've been having.
Rua led his remarkable community from this 2-storied circular meeting house, his tribal parliament. It was an architectural taonga built without using a single nail. Like the rest of the village, Hiona fell into disrepair, and this replica model is all that remains. Hiona was where the laws of the land were made, and Rua's followers lived happily. But the early 1900s would bring challenges that would change the way of life for many of my tipuna.
With the turn of the century, Europeans were moving into the district. Surveyors were coming into Maungapōhatu, trying to get in there and surveying the land. And Koro and his followers at Maungapōhatu, they didn't really want that to happen. But the surveying of the land would be the next thing would be the confiscation, or the soldiers come in and take it by force.
The government at the time felt that Maungapōhatu's autonomy undermined the Crown's authority, and they saw Rua as a threat. Whānau weren't required to pay taxes there, they lived off the land, and Rua was against Tūhoe men enlisting in World War I.
Did Rua always try to walk down the road of peace?
He tried to go the peaceful means. To me, he did succeed that way.
The Crown decided Rua's influence needed to be stamped out, and in 1916 around 70 police descended upon Maungapōhatu.
So on that day, they did a pōwhiri for the police?
Yes, they did. Our koro, our tipuna koro, and his two sons were out there to welcome the visitors like we always do, the manuhiri.
Instead, they were met with gunfire, police firing first and unleashing their full force on the remote village.
They were there to do a job and to break our community down at Maungapōhatu, to break our koro. Everyone was scared for their lives. That's when the mayhem started with the troops, saying that they were fired on first, and our whānau's up there said they were fired on by the troops as well. So it wasn't a very good time for our people.
2 men were killed in the battle, including Rua Kēnana's son Tokorua and Te Maipi Te Whiu. The wahine would also be terrorised.
Mahi tūkino.
Mahi tūkino, yeah. Mahi tūkino ki wa tātou wahine.
So you can see why they wouldn't want to bring up any of that.
Yeah, this is the reason why there wasn't spoke a lot about it, and to us as we were growing up here, it was sort of like a shameful thing on behalf of the Crown.
But it was Rua Kēnana who was charged with several crimes and taken to Auckland to stand trial, where he was convicted of resisting arrest. At the time, his was the longest court case in Aotearoa's history. Rua and his followers would have to pay for both the significant legal cost and the police expedition to Maungapōhatu.
So there was a lot of heavy debt that was put on him, not only debt, but spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and of course physically. Yeah, so he endured all that, and not only him, it was all his followers, the wives that he had, and the children.
Rua served 2 years of hard labour at Mount Eden prison. On his return to Maungapōhatu, most of his followers had left. The prosperous community he had built was broken. Before his death in 1937, he lived out his final years at this whare in Matahi. To this day, his followers still leave a whakaro on his windowsill. It's a token of their gratitude for the sacrifices Rua Kēnana made for his people.
I know he would have lived with a lot of that mamae. What do you think those final years for him here were like?
It would have been hard for him to not achieve what he wanted to achieve, but to us he did achieve what he set out to do, was to give us the enlightenment, to us pave the way into the new world, which is Te Hui, is what this place is named.
Coming up, what Rua Kēnana's imprisonment meant for future generations of whānau at Maungapōhatu.
You know, as culturally privileged as I am, I wouldn't want my children to inherit the trauma I've inherited.
The Pakeke of Maungapōhatu call their mountain Te Manawa o Tika a Maui, the heart of the North Island. And when this heart is well, it ripples out to the rest of the whenua. Rua Kēnana was a tohunga, a visionary, accepting his calling to lead his people. He came here to this sacred mountain where he saw a tohu, a diamond in the sky. At that moment he knew this was the place to build his promised land for his people, here at Maungapōhatu. As a great-great-grandson of Rua's, my first visit to Te Mapou Marae in Maungapōhatu was in 2017. History was made when an agreement with the Crown was signed, finally recognising the wrongful arrest of the Tūhoe prophet. That's when the government accepted that police actions in 1916 were and continue to be a source of deep pain, causing economic, social and spiritual damage to many of the whānau here.
It is important that the Crown acknowledges that its actions caused lasting damage to his character, mana and reputation, and carried by his descendants.
Now Rua's pardon is before Parliament, its first reading emotional for all those involved, including Māori Development Minister Nanaia Mahuta.
The Crown will, through this legislation, apologise to the descendants of Rua Kēnana e ngā toenga o ngā tamariki a Iharaira for the lasting damage to the character, the mana, the reputation of Rua Kēnana and his uri.
It really hit home. It was so emotional that I couldn't even explain the feeling that I was feeling at the time, and I didn't expect to feel that way.
One of Rua's uri, 30-year-old Atamira Tumarae-Nuku, is leading the fight to restore the mana of our karaua. Her grandmother, Kirituia Tumarae-Teka, was a driving force in seeking justice for the blood spilt at Maungapōhatu. When she was just 14 years old, she gave evidence at Maungapōhatu in her wharenui, Tāne Nui Arangi.
I think that was one of the real turning points in my life, having this sort of invisible weight on my shoulders. I talked about the impacts it had on the families, the things that happened to our kuia, the hurt and the pain and the suffering that was caused, not just to them 100 years ago, but how it was handed down to us and the stigma associated with that.
Kirituia passed away last year and sadly won't see the pardon passed into law. But Atamira is proud to carry on her nanny's legacy.
My nan, and I knew this from a young age, I guess. She was preparing me. She didn't know this is what was going to happen, but she knew that something was going to happen. And that because none of her children were able to take it on, that she knew it was one of her grandchildren, and it just happened to be me. She'll be at rest, at peace, knowing that we've gotten to this point.
The image of Rua Kēnana that I had ingrained in my mind is that famous black and white headshot with his long black hair and contemplative look. It's one that always captivated me and was fascinating. More than a century later, his story is still being told, but it's still a story that holds a lot of hurt for my whānau.
Just taking him away from the people. I always think about how the people felt and how lost they must have felt not having their leader. You know, as culturally privileged as I am, I wouldn't want my children to inherit the trauma I've inherited. I know it's all a blessing, but it's also a burden.
For Atamira, her whakapapa is tied into the whenua, and it's a place where she finds solace.
Kei nui tātou. E tō mātou matone te rani, tēnei te tuku whakamuimiti atu ki a koe, nā i tātou tiaki, manaaki, kia taipai mai ki konei.
What do you feel when you're walking through your ngahere, you know, the Ureweras up to Maungapōhatu?
I don't know, it's like I belong here, you know. I feel at home, I feel comfortable. Like I can be in the forest by myself and feel all right. So it's that sense of belonging and knowing my identity, knowing where I come from.
She's a kaitiaki and shares her mātauranga with visitors from around the world.
So here's a very juvenile medal, so it's really young, but it's a good sign. That means there's a mother medal around and her seeds are dropping. It's definitely grounded me in who I am and my identity, where I come from and where I want to go and where I want my children to be. So it's a strong connection.
Ngawaiata Turnbull also felt compelled to return home to help her people. She's completing her doctorate studies, focusing on the Iharaira faith that Rua Kēnana followed.
So that's part of my research now, is to interview and to draw from the living narratives inside of our kuia and karaua, our Pākeke that grew up practising that faith or witnessing that faith and those tikana.
She says it's that whakapono or faith that Rua practised that originally brought the people of Maungapōhatu together.
It was about wellness in the times of struggle, so the aftermath of all the land confiscations and the depression, the poverty, and so Te Rua, through his visions, I roto I wana whakakitena, he was able to just shine a light for people and gather them here as a refuge place.
But the Iharaira faith and its followers dwindled following Rua's arrest.
It was like spiritually, a whole community died after what happened. And that, I think, is where all the pain really comes from.
Because no one spoke of the police invasion that destroyed all that Rua had created, an entire generation has grown up not knowing their history.
And I never knew this. Before 14 years old, I never knew anyone died. I never knew that Rua was arrested. You know, I never knew that there were 70 officers that came into Maungapōhatu from Gisborne. All these things I learnt all at once in the space of 3 months. And it was quite overwhelming to find that out, yeah.
This Mō Teatea Te Taura Whiu Ko was written by Rua Kēnana during the 18 months he was an inmate at Mount Eden prison, where he was sentenced to hard labour. It's dedicated to his daughter and speaks of the pain of being ripped away from his beloved Maunga and his people.
The sadness and hurt he was still carrying from what happened in Maungapōhatu. I think about him composing that to help him lament and sort of deal with it, yeah.
What's hoped will help the people of Maungapōhatu is to restore the relationship of whānau to their whenua.
Then we can start to begin on a new journey to revitalization and to well-being.
Next, rewriting history, the healing journey begins.
Now's the time for our voice to be heard, for our people's voice to be heard.
As the people of Maungapōhatu look to the future. For a community that was all but destroyed 100 years ago, today Te Mapou Marae in Maungapōhatu is once again a hive of activity. And whānau are back rediscovering their connections.
Tua tahi tonu ko te whakaohoho I ngā whānau tonu o konei. Stepping into our role as kaitiaki o Maungapōhatu, mowing the lawn, water blasting, repairing the holes and the buildings and just tidying up.
The descendants of Tūhoe prophet Rua Kēnana are preparing the marae in the lead up to the official celebrations for his pardon later this month.
I can't believe we're almost at the time of the pardon being realised. On that day, we are expecting to have the Governor-General present, and so Iharaira, Ngawaiata Turnbull will be here in force. Ka hoki mai te karauna ki Maungapōhatu, ki te ukui tana hara, e kite ai te ao karekau he hara o Maungapōhatu, ko te karauna ki Ihara, ko te kāwanatanga.
But before the crown comes to them, the whānau have made the journey to the corridors of power, to the very place where the campaign to bring our karaua down was actioned. It's the next step towards restoring the relationship between Rua Kēnana's descendants and the crown.
The only crime committed at Maungapōhatu was by the government when it unleashed its force and caused blood to be spilled on the ground. When the heart is well, the body is well. This bill encourages our healing journey. E tautoko nui ana hau I tēnei pire.
This pire enables us as a people to move forward. And this process here today helps ease the pain of the past.
This Māori Affairs Select Committee is Atamira Tumarae-Nuku's opportunity to speak out, not just for herself, but for those who never lived to see this day.
For me, I think it was being here in person, kanohi kitea, and being able to try to connect the ministers with who we are and what we feel in our manawa and the mauri of what has been handed down to us.
With the government's commitment to include the history of Aotearoa in the school curriculum, there's no better time for Rua Kēnana's pardon to finally happen.
It's something very special, because as a child I never learnt any of it in kura. I only learnt it from my kuia and my karaua. And it wasn't until I was an adult today, now, that I realised how important it is to know.
Now the next generation are taking the lead on returning Maungapōhatu to its former glory, a place founded on peace.
We always say, roto I tō mātou whānau, that this place is he kāinga tiaki tamariki. Our tamariki are free to walk here. They don't really even need to be watched. It's safe. It's a safe place.
At its peak, what do you imagine life at Maungapōhatu was like?
I imagine this a lot, actually, and I only imagine it because I want to see it again. And I imagine that everybody in the community, they were well. I mean, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, and that our land was just a reflection of that.
Picking up where Rua Kēnana left off, rebuilding the Iharaira faith, and fulfilling his dream to bring his people back together and revitalise Maungapōhatu.
We're at that point where we're yearning for more, you know, like we want to learn more, we want to know more, and we want our children to know just as much as our kuia and our karaua knew.
The final reading of the bill is just the first part of the journey of my whānau to exonerate Rua Kēnana, learning from the mistakes of the past and ensuring that history never repeats.
This bill is a catalyst for the resurgence of Iharaira Tamakai Moana, to dream again, to build again, to seek the extraordinary examples of resilience from within our own history, to celebrate a community built on the tenets of equality.
Their collective pain has made the hapu stronger, confident about what their future holds.
My husband and I have given ourselves 3 to 5 years to move back and live there. If we could move today, we'll move today.
What do you envision the community looking like in 20, 30 years' time?
Self-sustainable, self-sufficient, connected, people connected to each other, people connected to the land, caring, loving, and hopeful. Yeah.
What's your challenge to the Crown?
My challenge is that this statutory pardon for my tipuna Rua is not just left on a piece of paper on a shelf somewhere, but it's actually meaningful, real, and restorative to our people.